The air in the great hall was thick with the scent of pine, musk, and anticipation. For most Omegas, the ceremony of choice was the happiest day of their lives. For me, Leo, it was the day I had stepped into a lifelong nightmare. In my past life, I had looked at Lucas, the golden lion shifter with the dazzling smile, and felt my heart soar. I chose him. And for 10 years, he made me pay for it. He loved my twin brother, Linus. He blamed me for stealing his destiny. When the great fire broke out, he didn't even look back as he carried Linus to safety, leaving me to be crushed by falling timber. Not today. Leo of the White Fox clan, the elder's voice boomed. Step forward and choose your alpha. The crowd whispered. My twin, Linus, stood to the side, looking ethereal and fragile. Lucas was already preening, his golden eyes locked on me with a smirk that said he expected to be picked, even though he'd spent the morning whispering sweet nothings to my brother. Go on, Leo, Linus whispered, his voice dripping with false sweetness. We all know who you've set your heart on. I looked at Lucas. He was handsome, sure. But all I saw was the man who let me die. Then, I shifted my gaze to the very back of the hall. There sat William. He was a massive shadow of a man. A black wolf shifter whose face was marred by jagged, silver scars from a rogue attack. He sat alone, his eyes downcast, expecting, as he did every year, to be left unclaimed. In my past life, William had died of winter solitude, because an alpha without a mate's warmth cannot survive the great frost. I started walking. Lucas stepped forward, puffing out his chest. Leo, I walked right past him. The hall went silent. I stopped in front of William. The big man flinched, his dark eyes wide with shock. William of the Iron Claw, I said, my voice ringing clear. Will you have me? What? Lucas's roar shook the rafters. He shifted partially, his golden mane sprouting from his neck. Leo, stop joking. You've been following me like a lost pup for years. You can't choose him. I turned, giving Lucas a look of pure, icy boredom. You're right, Lucas. I was a lost pup. But I finally found my internal compass, and it's pointing away from your ego. But he's a monster. Linus cried out, clutching his chest dramatically. Brother, look at his face. You'll be terrified every morning. I looked back at William. He was trembling. Up close, he smelled like rain and cedar. He looked like he wanted to bolt. Are you terrified of me, William? I asked softly. I am a scarred beast, little fox, William rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. I have nothing to give you but a cold cave and a broken name. I reached out, grabbing his massive, calloused hand and lacing my fingers through his. Then we'll buy a blanket and fix the name. Well, is that a yes, or do I have to get down on one knee? William's face flushed a deep, dark red, even over his scars. Yes, I accept. As we walked out of the hall, the clan members parted like the Red Sea. Lucas was throwing a literal temper tantrum in the background, kicking a stone pillar. He'll regret it, Lucas screamed. That wolf can't even afford high-quality meat. You'll be back, Leo. I ignored him and looked up at my new alpha. William was walking as if he were stepping on eggshells, terrified he might break me. Leo, William muttered once we were outside. Yes, Alpha. Why? I am not handsome. And your brother, he said you loved the lion. I stopped and poked William hard in his very muscular chest. Listen to me. Lucas is a wet cat with a loud mouth. You're a mountain. And I've always wanted to climb a mountain. William's ears, which had popped out in his shock, actually twitched. I see. I think I need to sit down. No sitting. We have shopping to do, I said, grabbing his arm. In my last life, lately, I've realized that life is too short for bad alphas and cheap wine. Since you've been living like a hermit, I assume you have a massive savings account. William blinked, dazed. I have many gold coins from the wars. I had nothing to spend them on. I grinned, my white fox tail popping out behind me and wagging furiously. Perfect. Let's go spend your trauma money on the softest bed in the kingdom. You're being spoiled starting today, Alpha. William looked down at the tiny, fierce fox man dragging him toward the market. For the first time in years, the scarred wolf smiled. It was a bit crooked, and a little scary, but to me, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The journey to William's territory was not paved with gold. While Lucas's pride lived in a marble palace with heated floors, William's estate was a rugged, windswept cliffside overlooking a crashing gray sea. The cave was exactly that, a massive, natural cavern carved into the obsidian rock. It was clean, sure, but it was empty. William stood at the entrance, his massive shoulders hunched, looking like a giant who had accidentally kidnapped a porcelain doll. "It is not the lion's den," he rumbled, his voice thick with a mix of shame and nerves. "There are no silk curtains. No servants. Just stone." I walked inside, my white fox tail sweeping the dust. I turned in a circle, looking at the moss-covered walls and the single, pathetic pile of dried grass that served as a bed. "William," I said, my voice echoing. He flinched, closing his eyes. "I know. It is a hole. You want to go back to the village. I will walk you." "William," I interrupted, walking over and poking his rock-hard bicep. "Do you have any idea how much potential this place has? The acoustics are incredible. I can scream at you and it'll sound like a choir." He blinked, his scarred face twitching in confusion. "You want to scream at me? Only if you don't help me move this rock," I chirped, pointing to a jagged boulder in the center of the room. "And look at this view. Lucas's palace smells like wet cat and expensive perfume. This smells like salt and freedom." Suddenly, a shadow darkened the cave entrance. Speak of the devil, or the mangy cat. "Leo, stop this madness." Lucas stood there, his golden fur cape fluttering in the wind. Behind him, Linus was dabbing his eyes with a silk handkerchief. "Brother," Linus sobbed quite fakely, "if you asked me. How can you live here? The dampness will ruin your fur. Look at poor William, he doesn't even have a chair for you to sit on." Lucas stepped forward, his lip curling in disgust as he looked at William. "Hey, Scarface. Move aside. I'm taking Leo back. I've decided to forgive him for this little tantrum. He can be my second mate. Linus won't mind sharing, will you, darling?" "Of course not," Linus chirped. "I'll give Leo all my old clothes." I felt the air in the cave grow heavy. William's beast was waking up. A low, vibrating growl started in his chest, a sound so deep it made my teeth rattle. His eyes turned a glowing, predatory amber. "He is my mate," William snarled, his claws extending from his knuckles. "He chose. Leave. Or what?" Lucas laughed, shifting his arms into heavy lion paws. "You're a freak, William. You can barely feed yourself in the winter. You'll let him freeze just to keep your pride." I stepped between them, placing a hand on William's heaving chest. The heat radiating off him was like a furnace. "Lucas," I said, my voice cold enough to start a blizzard. "You've got a lot of nerve talking about freezing. In my, let's call it a dream, you watched me freeze and didn't lift a finger. You think I want your silk chairs? I'd rather sleep on bare jagged rock with a man who actually looks at me when I speak, than in a gold bed with a narcissist who can't see past his own reflection." "Leo, you're being hysterical," Lucas started. "And another thing," I shouted, turning to William. "William, show them the special guest policy." William blinked. "The what?" "Throw them out," I whispered. William didn't need a second invitation. He shifted, not fully, but enough. His body doubled in size, black fur erupting along his spine. He let out a roar that literally blew Lucas's hair backward. With one massive sweep of his arm, he didn't hit them, but the sheer wind force sent the golden pair stumbling back toward the cliff path. "If I see you near my cave again," William roared, "I will treat you like the rogue hunters you are." Once they scrambled away, William shifted back, looking absolutely terrified. He looked at his claws, then at me. I was too loud," he whispered. "I frightened you." "Frightened me." I laughed, jumping up and throwing my arms around his thick neck. "That was the hottest thing I've ever seen. My alpha is a guardian." "Now, about that spoiling," I mentioned. William tilted his head. "I do not know how to spoil. I have only ever survived." "Step 1, I said, pulling out the heavy purse of gold coins we'd grabbed earlier. "We are going to the Hidden Valley Market. I want the thickest wool blankets in the north. I want dried venison, honey cakes, and a copper tub." "A tub?" William looked at the stone floor. "I can carry water from the spring in my mouth." "Absolutely not. We are bathing together like civilized beasts," I teased. William's entire face turned red. "Together. In the water. Yes, Alpha. And after that, you're going to brush my tail until it shines." For the rest of the evening, William was like a giant, panicked butler. He carried 6 crates of supplies at once so I wouldn't have to lift a finger. He spent 3 hours scrubbing the cave floor with a pine branch until his knuckles bled, just so my delicate fox paws wouldn't get dusty. When it finally got dark, he built a fire so large I thought the cave might melt. "Is it warm enough?" he asked, hovering over me. "Are you hungry? I caught 3 rabbits. I can catch 4. Do you need more grass for your nest? I can go to the meadow right now." I grabbed his tunic and pulled him down onto the new, plush blankets. "William, sit. Eat a honey cake." He sat, looking awkward as he held the tiny cake in his massive, scarred hand. He took a bite, his eyes widening. "It is sweet. Like you," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. He froze, then slowly, tentatively, he wrapped a massive arm around me, tucking me into his side. He was so warm, so much warmer than Lucas ever was. "Leo. I will not let you die in the winter," he whispered into my hair, his voice trembling with a vow he didn't even know I remembered. "I will burn the whole forest to keep you warm if I have to." I smiled, finally feeling safe. "I know you will, big wolf. But let's start with just the fireplace, okay? I like the trees." The first frost of the great winter arrived with a vengeance, dusting the obsidian cliffs in a layer of jagged white crystals. In my past life, this was the season of my slow breaking. Lucas had spent the winters hunting with Linus, leaving me to huddle in a drafty corner of the palace, surviving on the scraps of their fated romance. But in this life, the cave had become a fortress of absolute, ridiculous luxury. I woke up buried under 6 layers of premium mountain wool. It was so warm I was practically melting. I tried to stretch, but a heavy, furry weight was pinned across my waist. William was still asleep, his massive black wolf form partially shifted. He was mostly human, but his large, velvet-tufted ears and a tail the size of a redwood trunk were very much present. He had spent the entire night curled around me like a living space heater. "William," I whispered, poking his scarred cheek. "Alpha, I can't breathe. You're crushing your fox." His eyes snapped open, golden and sharp, before softening instantly into a gooey, domestic mess. "Leo, are you cold?" I felt a draft. "I'll go fetch more wood. I'll kill a bear and make another rug. Don't move. William, sit down." I laughed, pulling him back by his ear. "It's 100 degrees in here. You've turned this cave into a sauna." He sat up, his massive chest heaving with concern. The scars on his torso, reminders of old battles, rippled as he moved. I heard the wind. "The elders say this winter will kill the weak. I cannot let you be weak, Leo. I have more honey cakes in the stone larder. And I caught a mountain trout this morning while you were snoring." "I do not snore. Foxes chortle elegantly," I huffed, sitting up and letting the blankets slide down. William immediately averted his eyes, his face turning a comical shade of beet red. Even after a month of being mated, the terrifying black wolf was still a shy virgin at heart. "Alpha," I said, crawling into his lap and forcing him to look at me. "You've spent every waking second for 3 weeks making sure I'm spoiled. When do you get spoiled?" "I am spoiled," he rumbled, his large hand tentatively reaching out to stroke my white tail. "I have a mate who doesn't scream when he sees my face. I have a fire. I have purpose." I leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to the jagged scar that ran across his jaw. He let out a hitched breath, his tail thumping against the stone floor with the force of a hammer. "You're a sap, William. A big, scary, delicious sap." The peace was shattered by the sound of heavy boots crunching on the frost outside. "Leo, open this cave," I groaned. "If that's who I think it is, I'm going to shift and bite his nose off." William's demeanor changed instantly. The shy puppy disappeared, replaced by the apex predator. He stood up, his height dwarfing the cave entrance, and pulled on a fur tunic. "Stay behind me, little fox." We stepped out into the biting wind. There stood Lucas, looking significantly less golden than usual. His expensive silk cape was damp, and his face was pinched with cold. Behind him, a group of village alphas stood looking awkward. "Leo, thank the Great Spirit you're alive," Lucas said, though his eyes were darting toward the crates of dried meat stacked neatly by our door. "The lower valleys are freezing. The game has moved up to these cliffs. As the lead alpha of the Lion clan, I'm claiming this ridge as a communal hunting ground." I stepped out from behind William, crossing my arms. Communal. This ridge has been the Black Wolf's territory for 3 generations. You ignored it for years because you said it was barren and ugly. Things change. Lucas snapped. Then, his voice dropped into that manipulative, heroic tone he used to fool me with. Leo, look at you. You're thin. You're living in a hole. Come back to the village. We've set up a warm room for you. Linus misses his brother. Linus misses having someone to do his laundry, I retorted. And I'm not thin, Lucas. I'm well fed. William catches more in a morning than your entire hunting party does in a week. Lucas's eyes turned murderous. He looked at William. You're hoarding the elk, aren't you, freak? You're luring them up here with some dark wolf magic. Give us half your winter store, or we'll take it by force. The law says the pack comes before the individual. William stepped forward, his shadow falling over Lucas. I am not part of your pack. I was exiled. Remember, you called me a cursed omen. I'm the High Alpha. Lucas roared, his mane bristling. I make the rules. I could see William's resolve wavering. He still had the deep-seated fear that he was wrong, or bad, because of his scars. I wasn't having it. High Alpha. I stepped forward, laughing loudly. Lucas, you couldn't track a wounded moose in a snowstorm. You're only here because your people are hungry and you're too lazy to hunt the deep woods. You want William's food because he's a better provider than you'll ever be. You little. Lucas lunged forward, his hand shifting into a claw to grab my shoulder. He never reached me. In a blur of black fur and raw power, William shifted midair. The great black wolf, a beast the size of a small carriage, pinned Lucas to the frozen ground. His massive jaws were inches from Lucas's throat, a low, tectonic vibration shaking the very earth. William, wait! I shouted. The wolf froze, his golden eyes flicking to me. I walked over to the pinned, trembling Lucas. I leaned down, smiling sweetly. You want food, Lucas? Fine. I walked to our scrap pile, the bones and gristle William had set aside for the mountain crows. I picked up a particularly gnarly, picked clean rib bone and tossed it onto Lucas's chest. There. That's your share. Now, get off our mountain before my alpha decides you look like a side of bacon. William let out a roar that sent a nearby pine tree shedding all its snow. He released Lucas, who scrambled up, his face pale and his high alpha pride in tatters. You'll regret this, Leo. Lucas screamed as he fled down the path with his men. When the midwinter blizzard hits, you'll be begging to come to my fire. William shifted back, his chest heaving. He looked at me, his eyes full of uncertainty. I acted like a monster. Again, I walked up to him, wrapped my arms around his thick waist, and pressed my face against his warm skin. No, you acted like my alpha. And for the record, that was incredibly attractive. William blinked, his ears drooping in confusion. Truly, truly. Now, let's go back inside. That trout isn't going to eat itself, and I believe you promised me a tail brushing. Inside the cave, the fire roared. William sat on the plush rug, carefully running a bone comb through my white fox tail with hands that could crush stone but chose to be feather-light. Leo, he murmured, the orange firelight dancing in his dark eyes. Yes, William, I am glad you chose the nobody. I turned around, cupping his scarred face in my hands, feeling the steady, powerful thrum of his heart. William, in every life I have left, I'm choosing you. Now, stop talking and kiss your mate. He didn't need to be told twice. As the blizzard began to howl outside, the cave was the warmest place in the world. The midwinter blizzard had finally slammed into the obsidian cliffs, burying the world in 3 feet of unforgiving snow. But inside the cave, the temperature was soaring. It wasn't just the fire. It was the heat. In this life, my body had reacted to William with a ferocity I never felt for Lucas. My Omega instincts were screaming, my white fox tail was a frantic blur, and my scent, sweet jasmine and wild honey, was filling every crevice of the stone walls. Not there. No, William, the blue blanket goes on the left. I was currently in the middle of a nesting frenzy. I had dragged every soft thing we owned into the center of the cave. I was panting, my cheeks flushed pink, as I piled furs, wool, and even a few of William's oversized tunics into a circular fortress. William stood by the fire, looking utterly helpless. His own alpha scent, heavy musk, rain-drenched oak, and something primal, was thick enough to taste. His eyes were no longer brown, they were glowing pools of molten gold. Leo, he rumbled, his voice vibrating in his chest. I have brought the goose-down pillows from the village trader. I have also brought my oldest hunting cloak. It smells the most like me. Give it. I snatched the cloak from his hand, burying my face in the heavy fabric. The scent of him hit me like a physical wave, making my knees buckle. Yes. This. Put it here. William knelt beside me, his massive frame trembling. You are so beautiful when you nest, little fox. But you are shaking. Because you're standing 5 feet away. I snapped, then immediately whimpered, reaching for him. Come here. My nest is empty. I am empty. William crawled into the nest, the fur-lined circle barely containing his massive size. As soon as he was within reach, I lunged, wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him down. Leo, wait, William gasped, his hands hovering over my waist, afraid to grip too hard. I am a beast. If I lose control, I don't want to hurt you. My marks, they are permanent. I looked him dead in the eyes, my fingers trailing over the silver scars on his shoulder. In my past life, I was marked by a man who hated me. His bite felt like ice, but this time I want William. I want your fire, William. I want to look in the mirror and see that I belong to the strongest, kindest wolf in the north. Mark me. Claim me. Now. With a low, guttural growl that started deep in his soul, William finally snapped. He flipped me onto my back, his heavy weight pinning me into the soft furs. His mouth found the junction of my neck and shoulder, his hot breath ghosting over my skin. I arched my back, my fox ears pinning back in pure, unadulterated bliss. You are mine, he hissed against my skin. Mine to protect, mine to feed, mine to love. Show me, I whispered. The night became a blur of heat and friction. Unlike Lucas, who was always selfish and hurried, William treated my body like a sacred shrine. His large, calloused hands were incredibly gentle, tracing every curve of my ribs before pulling me into a crushing, passionate embrace. When his teeth finally sank into the scent gland at my neck, I didn't feel pain. I felt a golden thread snap into place, tying our souls together across time and space. I screamed his name into the rafters of the cave, my white tail entangling with his black one, as the blizzard roared outside. I woke up the next morning feeling like I had been run over by a very fluffy carriage. I was warm, sated, and smelled entirely of wolf. William was already awake. He was sitting at the edge of the nest, staring at me with an expression of pure, terrified devotion. He was holding a tray with a single, perfectly peeled orange and a cup of steaming herbal tea. You're awake, he said breathlessly. I checked your pulse 6 times. I thought I might have broken you. I tried to sit up and winced as my hips complained. You didn't break me, William. You just thoroughly calibrated me. He turned bright red. I have prepared the copper tub. The water is hot. I have also. I went out in the blizzard. You went out. Why? He reached behind him and pulled out a bundle of frost-covered winter roses, rare flowers that only grew on the highest peaks. I wanted you to have something pretty to look at when you woke up. Since I am not pretty. I pulled him down into the nest, ignoring my aching muscles, and kissed him until he was breathless. William, if you say you aren't pretty one more time, I'm going to bite you. You are a masterpiece. Our domestic bliss was interrupted by a frantic scratching at the heavy wooden door William had built for the cave. Leo, help, please. It was Linus's voice. But it wasn't his usual fake sweet tone, he sounded genuinely terrified. William shifted into a defensive crouch instantly, throwing a cloak over my bare shoulders. He opened the door just a crack. Linus tumbled in, his silk robes torn and his face bruised. The village. Linus sobbed, clutching at William's feet. The blizzard, it brought the shadow bears. They broke through the south gate. Lucas, he tried to fight them, but he's pinned in the great hall. He sent me to find the freak, because he knows William is the only one who can fight a shadow bear. I stood up, wrapping the cloak tight. So, when he wants our food, we're outcasts. But when a bear shows up, we're the village protectors. Please, Linus cried, looking at me. He's your alpha, Leo. You have to save him. I walked over to Linus and looked down at him. He's your alpha, Linus. Mine is right here. William looked at me, his golden eyes searching mine. Leo, what do you want me to do? If I go, I might not come back. If I stay, they die. I looked at the scars on William's face, scars he got protecting people who eventually threw him away. Then I looked at the bite mark on my neck. "We go," I said, my white fox tail bristling with power. "But we don't do it for Lucas. We do it to show them exactly what kind of monster they turned their backs on. And Linus, after this, you and your lion are never speaking to us again." The trek down the mountain was a descent into a frozen hell. The wind screamed like a dying banshee, and the snow was so thick it felt like walking through white wool. I rode on William's back, his massive black wolf form a warm, rhythmic engine of muscle beneath me. Behind us, Linus struggled, his thin silk robes a pathetic testament to his vanity. "Faster, William!" Linus shrieked from 10 paces back. "The shadow bears will have eaten the great hall by now." William didn't even huff. He just tilted his head back and let out a howl that vibrated through my very bones, a sound that told the mountain, the king is coming home. When we reached the village, the sight was grisly. The heavy oak gates were splinters. 3 shadow bears, beasts made of literal darkness and claws, were tearing at the roof of the great hall. Inside, I could hear the panicked roars of the lion clan. "Hold the line." Lucas's voice cracked with terror. "Linus, where is the help?" William didn't wait. He launched himself from the ridge, a black bolt of lightning. He slammed into the largest shadow bear, his jaws locking onto its neck with a sickening crunch. The dark ichor of the beast sprayed across the white snow. I shifted. My white fox form was small, but I was fast. I darted between the legs of the second bear, nipping at its tendons, distracting it while William finished the first. "Leo." Lucas appeared at the shattered door of the hall, his golden mane matted with blood and soot. He looked pathetic. His pride was hiding behind him, trembling. You actually brought the freak. Shut up and fight, Lucas." I barked, my fox voice a sharp yip. "Or move out of the way so a real alpha can work." The largest shadow bear, a monster standing 12 feet tall, swiped at William, catching him across the shoulder. William roared, not in pain, but in fury. He shifted back to his human form midair, grabbing a fallen spear from the snow. The villagers watched from the windows, breathless. They saw the monster they had exiled standing between them and certain death. "William, behind you!" I screamed, shifting back to human and throwing a heavy torch at the third bear's face. William spun, the spear whistling through the air. He drove it through the shadow bear's chest, pinning it to the stone wall of the hall. He stood there, chest heaving, his silver scars glowing red in the firelight. He looked like a god of war. The last bear, seeing its kin fall, retreated into the blizzard with a mournful howl. Silence fell over the village. Only the crackling of the fires and the heavy breathing of the black wolf remained. Lucas stepped out, trying to straighten his torn cape. He looked at the villagers, then at William. The jealousy in his eyes was a physical thing. "Well," Lucas said, his voice trembling as he tried to regain his authority. "You did your duty, William. We'll allow you to take some scrap meat as a reward. Now, Leo, come inside. You've had your fun with the stray, but the blizzard is still." "I'm going to stop you right there," I said, stepping into the light. I walked over to William, who was bleeding from the shoulder. I tore a strip of my own tunic and began wrapping his wound, ignoring everyone else. "Leo, I am talking to you." Lucas roared. "I am the lead alpha. I saved this village today by hiding." A voice came from the crowd. It was the elder, the one who had presided over the ceremony of choice. He walked forward, looking at Lucas with pure disdain. "We saw it, Lucas. You pushed the younger Omegas in front of you when the bears broke the door. You cried for your life while the freak bled for ours." "That's a lie," Linus sobbed, running to Lucas's side. Lucas was brave. He was strategically retreating. I started laughing. It was a cold, jagged sound. Strategically retreating into a closet. "Lucas, you're a coward. And Linus, you're a fool. You deserve each other." I turned to the villagers, my voice ringing out. "You all stood by and watched while this man was exiled. You called his scars a curse. Today, those scars saved your children. We don't want your meat. We don't want your forgiveness. We are going back to our mountain. You can't leave." Lucas lunged for my arm, his face twisted. "You belong to this village. You belong to me." Before he could touch me, William moved. He didn't shift. He didn't roar. He simply caught Lucas's wrist in one hand and squeezed. The sound of Lucas's bones groaning was audible. Touch him, William whispered, his voice like the shifting of tectonic plates, and I will show you why they call me a monster. I will not stop until there is nothing left of your golden pride, but dust. Lucas collapsed to his knees, whimpering. He looked up at me, his eyes begging. Leo, please. I love you. I've always loved you. I was confused by Linus. Give me another chance. I looked at the man who had let me die in my past life. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a profound sense of boredom. William, I said, tucking my hand into my alpha's large palm. Let's go home. The air here smells like garbage. The return to the nest. The walk back up the mountain was quiet. The blizzard had calmed into a gentle snowfall. When we finally reached our cave, the fire was still glowing low in the hearth. William sat on the edge of our massive, fur-lined nest, looking down at his hands. Leo. Yes, Alpha. I was busy heating up some cider, humming to myself. You could have stayed. They would have made you the High Alpha's mate again. They were cheering for you. I walked over and sat between his legs, leaning my head against his broad chest. William, look at me. He looked down, his eyes soft and uncertain. I don't want a village of people who only love me when they're afraid, I said firmly. I want a cave with a wolf who loves me even when I'm being a brat. I want the man who spent 3 hours yesterday carving a wooden fox for me just because I said I liked the shape of the wood. That's my High Alpha. That's my mate. William let out a long, shaky breath and pulled me into his lap, burying his face in my neck. I am not good with words, Leo. But I would do it again. Every bear, every blizzard. Just to hear you say that. Good, I teased, nipping his ear. Because tomorrow, you're helping me expand the larder. I think we need space for a nursery soon. William froze. His tail, which had been wagging slowly, suddenly went stiff. A nursery. For pups. White wolf pups, I whispered, grinning. Or maybe black foxes. Either way, they're going to be as spoiled as I am. William fainted. He literally just tipped backward into the furs, his face a mask of pure, overwhelmed joy. I laughed, curling up on top of him. Welcome to your new life, Alpha. It's going to be a wild ride. The winter sun was pale, a weak eye watching the obsidian cliffs as my belly grew heavy with the life we had created. I was 8 months pregnant, round, glowing, and, according to William, the most precious treasure in the history of the world. William was out checking the perimeter traps. He hadn't wanted to leave, but I'd insisted. I'm a fox, William, not a glass vase. Go. I'll stay by the fire. I was smoothing out the furs in our nursery to be when a scent hit me. It wasn't the clean, cold smell of my wolf. It was the stench of rotting pride and wet cat. Leo, a voice rasped from the shadows of the cave entrance. I spun around, my hand flying to my stomach. Lucas stood there. He was no longer the golden lion. His mane was matted with filth, his ribs poked through his skin, and his eyes were bloodshot, dancing with a terrifying, manic light. Lucas, how dare you enter this? I had a dream, Leo, he interrupted, stepping closer. He was shaking, holding a strange, glowing blue crystal, a relic of the old shamans. A dream. No. It was a memory. I saw it. I saw a life where you chose me. My heart stopped. I saw how I treated you, Lucas whispered, a twisted grin spreading across his face. I saw myself laughing while you cried. I saw the fire. I saw the timber falling on your beautiful face. And I saw myself. I saw myself carrying Linus away while you screamed my name until your lungs filled with ash. He lunged forward, the blue crystal pulsing. And I realized, Leo. I was the king in that world. You were mine to break. In this life, I am a beggar. I am a joke. You took my destiny and gave it to a monster. Before I could shift, he smashed the crystal at my feet. A cloud of numbing blue gas exploded. My vision swam, my legs gave out, and the last thing I felt was Lucas's filthy hands dragging me toward the cold. I woke up chained to a rusted iron post in a damp, hidden grotto near the village borders. My stomach cramped, the pups were kicking frantically, sensing my distress. Wake up, my little runaway, Lucas cooed. He was sitting on a rock, sharpening a dagger. The village elders kicked me out. They say I'm unstable. But they'll see. When I kill the wolf's pups and take you back, everything will reset. The universe will give me back my throne. You're insane, Lucas, I hissed, my voice cracking. The universe didn't cheat you. You cheated yourself. You were a cruel man in that life, and you're a pathetic one in this one. Shut up, he roared, slamming the dagger into the ground inches from my thigh. I saw the end, Leo. I saw you die. You were supposed to die for me. That is your purpose. My purpose, I breathed, looking him in the eyes, was to find someone who actually loved me. And I did. William is coming for you. And when he arrives, there won't be enough of you left for a funeral. The air in the grotto suddenly plummeted by 20 degrees. A sound echoed from the entrance, not a howl, not a growl, but a sound of pure, vibrating slaughter. The stone entrance literally exploded inward. William didn't come in as a man. He came in as the great black wolf, but he was different. His fur was standing on end, and a dark, terrifying aura of alpha energy radiated from him so strongly that the iron chains holding me began to rattle. William, I cried. Lucas scrambled back, grabbing me and holding the dagger to my throat. Stay back, freak. One step and I'll carve the fox out of him. I know the truth now. He was supposed to be mine. William stopped. He shifted, his body rippling back into his human form. His eyes were not golden anymore, they were void black. He was bleeding from his paws where he had run through the jagged rocks to find me. Lucas, William said, his voice so low it felt like a grave opening. Let him go. Why? So you can go back to your cozy cave. Lucas laughed hysterically, the blade nicking my skin. A single drop of blood ran down my neck. I saw the other life, William. You died. You died in the snow, alone and forgotten. You weren't supposed to have him. William looked at the blood on my neck. His expression didn't change, but the ground beneath his feet cracked. In that life, William said softly, I may have died. But in this life, I am the mate of Leo of the White Fox. I am the father of his children. And I am the man who is going to end your existence. Lucas lunged, trying to plunge the knife into my belly. I didn't wait for William. With the last of my strength, I shifted my tail into its fox form and swept Lucas's legs out from under him. He stumbled, and in that split second, the black wolf was upon him. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. William swiped his claws across Lucas's chest, throwing him against the stone wall. Lucas coughed blood, his golden fur turning crimson. He looked up, his eyes finally clearing from the madness of the crystal. It was so bright, Lucas whispered, looking at the ceiling. In the dream, I was a king. You were a ghost, I said, leaning against William as he rushed to my side. And now, you're nothing. Lucas took one last, rattling breath, his hand reaching out for a crown that was never there, and then his eyes went still. The lion was dead, not as a hero, but as a shadow of a man who couldn't handle a world where he wasn't the center of it. Leo. The blood, your neck. William was frantic, his huge hands shaking as he checked my stomach. The pups. Are they? I grabbed his face, pulling him down into a fierce kiss. We're okay, Big Wolf. We're okay. But, William, yes, anything. I'll build a hospital. I'll carry you to the sun. I think the pups didn't like the excitement, I gasped, a sharp pain radiating through my midsection. We need to get home. Now. 3 weeks later. The snow was melting, sending little streams of crystal water dancing down the obsidian cliffs. Inside the cave, the fire was low and sweet-smelling. William was sitting in the center of the nest, looking absolutely terrified. In each of his massive arms, he held a tiny bundle. One was a charcoal gray wolf pup with white paws. The other was a snow-white fox pup with a black-tipped tail. They're so small, William whispered, as the fox pup nipped his thumb with tiny, needle-sharp teeth. I am going to drop them. Leo, take them. I am too big. I leaned back against the plush pillows, sipping my tea and watching my mate. You've been saying that for 3 hours, William. You haven't dropped them yet. Besides, they like your scent. Look, the little wolf is falling asleep on your scar. William looked down at the pup curled against his jagged facial scar. He let out a long, shaky sigh, his entire body relaxing into the furs. I used to think this face was a curse, he murmured. I leaned over and kissed the tip of his nose. It was just a map, Alpha. It led me straight to where I was supposed to be. Outside, the village was rebuilding under a new leader. Linus had moved to a distant clan, unable to face the memory of what he and Lucas had done. But up on the cliff, the world was perfect. Leo. Let's have 6 more. I choked on my tea. 6. William, get out. The cave echoed with the sound of a wolf's deep laughter and a fox's indignant yips, drifting out over the mountain, a song of a second chance that had finally, beautifully, come true. Next. There another similar story. The chandeliers of the Valerius estate flickered with a cold, crystalline light, casting long shadows across the velvet-draped dining hall. For Leo, these dinners were a practiced exercise in invisibility. He sat at the far end of the table, his posture perfect, his expression a mask of porcelain indifference. Beside him, the air was thick with the cloying, sugary scent of Elias's pheromones, a fragrance their mother, Sylvia, often likened to blooming jasmine in the summer sun. Across the table sat William von Hart, the young duke whose lineage was as formidable as his reputation. He was silent, his dark eyes unreadable as he watched the spectacle before him. You must try the venison, William, Sylvia chirped, leaning forward so far her diamonds rattled. She gestured toward Elias, who was currently fluttering his eyelashes with practiced grace. Our Elias hand selected the herbs from the conservatory. He has such a delicate touch, so unlike his brother, who spends his days inhaling nothing but dust and old ink. Elias giggled, a sound like silver bells. Oh, mother, don't be so harsh. I'm sure Leo's books are very informative, even if they don't teach one how to run a proper household. Leo didn't look up from his plate. He had long ago learned that defending himself only gave Sylvia more ammunition. He was the defect of the Valerius bloodline, the Omega who grew too tall, whose eyes were the color of a winter storm rather than a warm hearth, and who refused to perform the submissive dances expected of his rank. It is a shame, really, Sylvia continued, her voice dropping into a tone of mock pity that carried perfectly across the room. We had hoped for 2 gems, but instead, we have 1 diamond and a piece of flint. Hard, cold, and utterly useless in a marriage bed. I often tell my husband it's a blessing the alphas of the capital have such discerning taste. It saves Leo the embarrassment of being rejected to his face. Leo felt the familiar sting, but he countered it by mentally reciting a complex chemical formula he'd read that afternoon in the library. C10H15N, he focused on the logic of atoms, where things made sense and merit actually mattered. Suddenly, a deep, resonant voice broke the flow of Sylvia's vitriol. And what is it you study so diligently, Lord Leo? The table went silent. Sylvia blinked, her fork hovering midair. Elias's smile faltered. Even the servants seemed to freeze. William was looking directly at Leo. Leo raised his gray eyes, meeting the Duke's gaze for the first time. He didn't flinch. Statecraft, Your Grace, and the recent shifts in maritime trade laws between the northern territories. Sylvia let out a sharp, forced laugh. See, dreadfully boring. No alpha wants a spouse who talks of trade laws when they should be discussing the guest list for the spring gala. The unspoken interest. William didn't look away from Leo. A faint, almost imperceptible twitch of his lips, not quite a smile, but something sharper, appeared. On the contrary, William said smoothly, his voice cutting through the floral scent of the room like a cold wind. A partner who understands the mechanics of power is far more valuable than one who merely knows how to decorate a room. He stood up, his towering alpha presence commanding the space. The dinner was illuminating, Countess. But I find the air in here a bit stifling. Lord Leo, would you show me to this library I keep hearing so much about? I find myself in need of something more substantial than sweets. Elias turned pale, his perfect Omega scent turning sour with sudden anxiety. Sylvia opened her mouth to protest, but the look in William's eyes silenced her. The walk to the library was conducted in a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. Behind them, Leo could practically hear his mother's soul leaving her body in a fit of silent rage, while Elias's scent had shifted from sweet jasmine to something resembling overripe vinegar. As soon as the heavy oak doors of the library swung shut, Leo turned, his long, snow-white hair catching the moonlight filtering through the high-arched windows. You shouldn't have done that, Your Grace, Leo said, his voice steady but cautious. My mother is likely currently drafting a letter to the Pope to have me exorcised for bewitching you. William didn't look like a man who feared exorcisms. He scanned the floor-to-ceiling shelves, his eyes lingering on a stack of leather-bound journals on Leo's desk. If a conversation about maritime law is considered witchcraft, then the world is far more magical than I previously thought. The tension was suddenly broken by a muffled thump from behind a velvet curtain in the corner. Ouch! Damn it, Toby, stop stepping on my hem. A muffled voice hissed. Leo sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You can come out, Uncle Julian. And bring the stable boy with you. The curtains parted to reveal Julian Valerius, the family's eccentric, black sheep, uncle who had never married and spent most of his time drinking expensive gin and gossiping with the staff. Beside him stood Toby, a freckled lad of 19 who was supposed to be grooming horses but was currently holding a plate of stolen shrimp puffs. We were just checking the structural integrity of the masonry, Julian announced, brushing lint off his silk waistcoat. He squinted at William. Dreadfully handsome, aren't you? A bit grim, but the jawline makes up for the lack of personality. I'm Julian. This is Toby. Toby's the best spy in the house because he smells like hay and no one notices him. It's an honor, Duke, Toby squeaked, offering a shrimp puff to the most powerful alpha in the province. William looked at the shrimp, then at the wide-eyed boy, and actually took one. Thank you, Toby. It's excellent. Julian circled William like a vulture looking for gold. So, did you really snub the golden child for my silent snowdrop here? Sylvia is downstairs currently trying to swallow her own tongue. It's marvelous entertainment. Uncle, please, Leo pleaded, his cheeks tinged with a faint, rare pink. The Duke is a guest. The Duke is a predator, Leo. Look at those eyes, Julian whispered loudly. He's not here for the delicate Omegas. He looks like he wants someone he can actually have a conversation with without needing a translator for giggles. William turned his gaze back to Leo, ignoring Julian's theatrics. Your uncle is perceptive. Tell me, Leo, why do you stay? With your knowledge of trade and law, you could have run a merchant guild by now. Leo leaned against his desk, the moonlight making his gray eyes look like polished silver. Because in this kingdom, an Omega without an Alpha's protection is a liability. If I left, my parents would use the law to drag me back. I've spent 25 years becoming invisible so they'd forget to lock the door. I didn't expect you to kick the door down tonight. William stepped closer. He didn't use his alpha scent to dominate, instead, he radiated a calm, grounding warmth that Leo found dangerously inviting. What if the door stayed open? William asked. Oh, he's courting him. Toby whispered to Julian. Should I get more shrimp? Shish. This is the good part, Julian hissed back. Leo looked at William, his heart doing a strange, rhythmic gallop. You've met Elias. He is exactly what your advisors would want. He's pretty, he's social, and he'll agree with everything you say. Why me? I'm Flint, remember. Flint creates sparks, Leo, William said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register. Jasmine just fades. I have enough people in my life who agree with me. I want someone who will challenge me. Someone who knows that the northern trade route is failing because of the new tariff on timber, not because of bad luck. Leo blinked. You actually read my paper in the Royal Economic Journal. I used a pseudonym, L.V. Snown. It wasn't hard to figure out once I saw your hair. William smiled, a real, genuine smile that made him look 10 years younger and devastatingly handsome. I didn't come here for an engagement dinner. I came for the author. Leo felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in years, hope. It was terrifying. My parents will never allow it. They want the best for Elias. They'll think you're joking. Then let them think it's a joke, William said, reaching out. His fingers brushed against Leo's white hair, his touch surprisingly gentle. Until the marriage contracts are signed. I'm the Duke of Heart. If I say I want the defective twin, no one in this house has the power to say no. I'm not a prize to be won, William, Leo reminded him, though his body was leaning into the touch. I know, William murmured. You're a partner to be earned. Tomorrow, I shall ask your father for your hand. I expect a full lecture on the maritime laws of the South as my dowry. Julian let out a dramatic sob from the corner. It's so romantic. Toby, give me your handkerchief, I'm a mess. Leo laughed, a bright, clear sound that filled the dusty library. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a ghost in his own home. He felt seen. You realize, Leo whispered, looking up at William, that when Sylvia finds out, she will actually explode. I'll pay for the cleaning fees, William promised, his eyes dancing with mischief. The morning after the library heist, the Valerius mansion was a hive of frantic, perfumed energy. Sylvia had spent the night convinced that William's interest in the library was merely a highbrow detour before the inevitable proposal to Elias. "He's testing your patience, darling," Sylvia whispered as she cinched Elias's corset until he gasped. "Alphas like him want to see if you can handle their intellectual moods. Today, you must be irresistible. Show him that a library is a cold place, but a marriage bed is warm." Elias, dressed in sheer silk and smelling of a concentrated jasmine balm, nodded determinedly. "I'll make him forget Leo even has a name." The dining room was bathed in sunlight. Leo sat in his usual spot, nursing a cup of black tea and reading a treatise on soil rotation. He looked refreshed, a stark contrast to the dark circles under his parents' eyes. When William entered, the air pressure in the room seemed to drop. He looked devastating in a charcoal frock coat, his eyes immediately finding Leo's. A small, private nod passed between them, a silent, "good morning," that made Leo's heart skip. "Your Grace," Count Valerius boomed, standing up so fast he nearly toppled his juice. "We trust you slept well. Our Elias has been up since dawn preparing a special blend of tea just for you." Elias didn't just bring the tea, he practically glided into William's personal space. As he poured the cup, he leaned in so close his chest brushed William's shoulder. "It has rosehips and honey, Your Grace," Elias whispered, his voice a breathy tremolo. "I find it stimulates the senses." William shifted slightly, his expression hardening into granite. "I prefer my tea like my trade agreements, Lord Elias. Straightforward and without unnecessary additives." Elias's smile didn't falter, but his eyes grew desperate. As the meal progressed, he abandoned all aristocratic decorum. He, accidentally, dropped his silk napkin and, instead of letting a servant retrieve it, he knelt slowly at William's feet, looking up through his lashes with wide, watery eyes. "Oh dear," Elias cooed, his hand lingering on William's knee for a second too long. "I'm so clumsy today. Perhaps I need a strong hand to steady me." Leo watched this with a mix of secondhand embarrassment and mild fascination. It was like watching a slow-motion carriage crash. "Elias," Leo said softly, "you're getting silk in the gravy." "Stay out of this, Leo," Sylvia snapped, before turning a blindingly fake smile back to William. "He's just so spirited, Your Grace. Such a vibrant Omega." The breaking point came when William stood up to address the Count. "Lord Valerius, I believe it is time we discussed the purpose of my visit. I have reached a decision regarding the union between our houses." Elias saw his window closing. In a move that shocked even the stoic butler, he threw himself into William's arms. He bared his neck, a gesture of total Omega submission that was usually reserved for private chambers or legal bonding ceremonies. "Choose me, William," Elias begged, his voice loud and trembling. "I'll be whatever you want. I'll be quiet, I'll be loud, I'll give you heirs every year." "Don't look at him. He's cold. He doesn't even have a scent. He's a statue. Look at me, smell me." He began to release his pheromones in waves, a desperate, cloying sweetness intended to trigger an alpha's instinct to claim. William didn't growl. He didn't pull Elias closer. Instead, he took Elias by the wrists and firmly, but coldly, detached him. He held Elias at arm's length, his gaze as sharp as a guillotine. "Lord Elias," William said, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Submission is a gift given in love, not a currency used to buy a title. You are demeaning yourself, and more importantly, you are insulting the dignity of this house." William turned to the Count and Countess, who looked like they were witnessing a natural disaster. "I came here to find a partner," William stated. "And I have found one. One who values his mind, who respects his own soul, and who doesn't feel the need to perform like a trained pet." He walked over to Leo. The room held its breath. William didn't ask Leo to submit. Instead, he reached out a hand, palm up, an invitation between equals. "Count Valerius," William said, his eyes never leaving Leo's gray ones. "I am here to formally request the hand of your son, Leo Valerius, in marriage. I offer the Hart Estates, the northern shipping lanes, and my personal protection. In return, I ask only for Leo's companionship and his brilliance." Sylvia let out a strangled noise, something between a sob and a scream. "Leo! But, he's the tall one. He's the one with the books. He's the defect. Then I have a penchant for defects, William snapped, his alpha aura finally flaring, heavy and commanding, silencing Sylvia instantly. He looked back at Leo, his voice softening. What say you, Leo? Will you leave this library for one twice its size at my estate? Leo stood up, his movements fluid and dignified. He looked at his crying brother and his gaping parents, then back at the man who had seen him through the dust and ink. Leo took William's hand. His grip was firm. I think, Leo said with a small, witty smile, that I would like to see your collection of maritime maps very much, William. In the corner, Julian poked his head out from behind a buffet table, Toby right behind him. 10 gold pieces, says Sylvia faints in 3, 2, 1. Julian whispered. Thump. Sylvia hit the Persian rug with a dramatic flourish. Pay up, Toby, Julian grinned, popping a grape into his mouth. The flint just caught fire, and I wouldn't miss the blaze for the world. The transition from the Valerius estate to the Duke's ancestral seat, Hart Castle, was like moving from a gilded birdcage to a fortress of iron and velvet. The marriage contract had been signed in a room so thick with Sylvia's silent weeping that the ink nearly smeared. Elias had refused to attend the small, private ceremony, claiming a migraine, though the servants whispered he'd spent the morning shredding his finest silk tunics in a fit of pique. The carriage pulled up to the massive stone steps of the castle. Leo looked up at the gray spires against the dusk sky, his fingers nervously twisting the silver embroidery of his wedding coat. It's not as delicate as your father's mansion, William said, reaching across the carriage to steady Leo's hand. It's drafty, the library smells of cedar, and the head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, is more terrifying than any alpha general I've met. Leo smiled, a genuine spark in his gray eyes. Drafts I can handle. Cedar is my favorite scent. And as for Mrs. Gable, I've dealt with my mother for 25 years. I think I'll survive. As they stepped out, the staff was lined up. At the front stood a woman who looked like she was carved from the same granite as the castle walls. Your Grace, Mrs. Gable nodded to William, then turned a piercing gaze on Leo. And the new Grace. I've prepared the North Suite. It has the best light for reading. I trust you won't be like the last guest we had who insisted on pink roses in every corner. They make me sneeze. I prefer ink and parchment, Mrs. Gable, Leo said smoothly. And perhaps a very strong cup of coffee at 6 in the morning. The woman's stern face softened by exactly 1 millimeter. A man of sense. Welcome home, my lord. Inside the master suite, the fire crackled, casting a warm orange glow over the massive canopy bed. The air was quiet, a silence Leo wasn't used to. In the Valerius house, silence was a weapon used to ignore him. Here, it felt like a sanctuary. William entered, having shed his heavy formal cape. He looked at Leo, who was standing by the window, looking out at the darkened moors. You look like a ghost standing there, Leo, William murmured, walking over. Are you regretting it? The defect, who married the Duke? Leo turned, his white hair shimmering. I'm wondering when the other shoe drops. My whole life, I was told I was the backup. The spare parts. I keep waiting for you to realize you could have had someone easier. William stepped into Leo's space, his scent, sandalwood and cold rain, wrapping around Leo like a physical embrace. He placed his hands on the window frame, effectively pinning Leo between himself and the glass. Easier is boring, Leo. I don't want a spouse who looks at me and sees a title. I want the man who argued with me about the 1824 Tariff Act while his mother was trying to sell his brother like a prize heifer. William leaned down, his lips brushing Leo's ear. And for the record, your scent. It's not, nothing. It's like the air right before a snowstorm. It's clean. It's sharp. It's the only thing I want to breathe. Leo's breath hitched. He reached up, his fingers trembling slightly as he unbuttoned the top of William's shirt. You're very good at this, Your Grace. The flirting. I've had a lot of practice being stoic, William chuckled, his voice dropping to a low, husky vibration. But with you, I find I don't want to be stoic at all. The honeymoon peace was shattered 3 days later. A carriage bearing the Valerius crest thundered into the courtyard. Out stepped Elias, looking pale and clutching a handkerchief, followed by a very disgruntled Toby, who had apparently been coerced into being a valet. Leo. Oh, my poor, sweet brother. Elias wailed as he burst into the morning room where Leo and William were reviewing land deeds. Leo blinked. Elias, what are you doing here? Mother said you were bedridden with grief over my departure. I couldn't let you face this alone. Elias cried, throwing himself into a chair. He shot a look at William, a look that was supposed to be vulnerable, but came off as desperate. I know how difficult it must be for a duke to manage an Omega who doesn't know how to please. I've come to help Leo learn the finer points of being a consort. William didn't even look up from his ledger. We are doing quite well, Lord Elias. Leo has already reorganized the estate's grain tax. It's the most pleasing thing I've seen in years. Elias's face twisted. He stood up and walked over to William, accidentally stumbling so he could grab William's arm. But surely, Your Grace, you must miss the warmth. The jasmine. This castle is so cold. Don't you find Leo's company a bit academic? Leo stood up. He didn't look angry, he looked bored. He walked over and gently peeled Elias's hand off his husband's arm. Elias, dear, Leo said, his voice sweet but laced with iron. You are confusing academic with competent. William doesn't need a flower for a husband, he needs a duke. And I am the Duchess. You're an Omega. Elias hissed, his jealousy finally bubbling over. You were supposed to stay in the library until you turned into dust. He was supposed to choose me. I'm the pretty one. Everyone says so. The room went ice cold. William stood up, his alpha presence flaring so sharply that the tea in the cups seemed to ripple. Everyone, William said, his voice a low growl, was wrong. Lord Elias, you will stay in the guest wing for one night. Tomorrow, Toby will escort you back to your parents. If you ever attempt to instruct my husband on how to be himself again, I will personally ensure your family's allowance is recalculated. Elias shrunk back, his lip trembling. You're choosing him. Still, every day, William said, stepping beside Leo and putting a protective arm around his waist. Now, go. I believe Toby has some shrimp puffs waiting for you in the kitchen. He tells me they're the only thing that calms your nerves. Later that night, as the castle settled into a peaceful hush, Leo sat in the library, which was indeed twice the size of his old one. William was sitting in a matching armchair, reading a book of poetry. He really did try to seduce you with a stumble, Leo said, turning a page. William looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. It was a very poor stumble. His form was all wrong. You, on the other hand. You seduced me with a footnote about timber exports, William said, standing up and extending a hand. Which is far more dangerous. Leo laughed, taking his husband's hand. Well, Your Grace, wait until you hear my thoughts on the new silver mining permits. You won't know what hit you. I look forward to it, William whispered, pulling him close for a kiss that tasted like cedar, ink, and a future that was finally, beautifully, his own. The Royal Winter Gala was the social equivalent of a battlefield, and for the first time in his life, Leo wasn't hiding in the trenches. The grand ballroom of the capital was a sea of gold leaf, silk, and whispered scandals. As the heavy doors opened, the herald's voice rang out, silencing the orchestra for a heartbeat. The Duke and Duchess of Hart. Leo stepped forward, his hand resting firmly on William's charcoal-clad arm. He wore a suit of deep midnight velvet that made his snow-white hair look like fallen starlight. He didn't look like the spare, Valerius brother, he looked like a king who had finally claimed his throne. The whispers began immediately, buzzing like hornets. Is that the quiet one? I heard he tricked the Duke with ancient spells. Look at his posture, he doesn't even have a scent. How unnatural. In the center of the room stood Sylvia and Elias. Sylvia was draped in enough lace to cover a small village, and Elias was surrounded by a few minor alphas, though his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped bird. When he saw Leo, his fan snapped shut with a crack that sounded like a pistol shot. Leo, there you are. Sylvia swooped in, her eyes scanning William's face for any sign of regret. We were just telling the Baroness how surprised we were by your sudden elevation. It's quite a change from the dusty attic, isn't it? William's grip on Leo's waist tightened, his alpha pheromones flaring, a silent, protective warning that made the nearby nobles take a step back. It is a change for the better, Countess. Hart Castle has never been brighter. Elias stepped forward, smelling of a desperate amount of lily of the valley. He looked at William, ignoring Leo entirely. Your Grace, the first waltz is starting. Surely, you wouldn't want to dance with someone as stiff as Leo. He never learned the steps. He was too busy reading. Elias reached out, his fingers hovering near William's chest. I, on the other hand, have practiced every night. I could lead you perfectly. Leo didn't wait for William to answer. He stepped between them, his gray eyes flashing with a cold, brilliant fire. Actually, Elias, Leo said, his voice calm and carrying across the circle of onlookers. William and I have developed our own rhythm. And while you were practicing your steps, I was practicing the Hart estate ledger. It seems our family, specifically Mother's jewelry budget, has been drawing heavily from a trust that William now oversees. Sylvia turned a ghostly shade of gray. Leo, this is hardly the place. I think it's the perfect place, Leo countered, a small, sharp smile touching his lips. Since you were so fond of discussing my defects in public for 25 years, I thought you'd appreciate a public update on my assets. William let out a low, delighted chuckle. He turned to the orchestra leader and nodded. The music shifted, a complex, sweeping masterpiece that required precision and grace. Shall we, my love? William asked, offering his hand. Leo took it. They moved to the center of the floor. Contrary to Elias's petty lies, Leo moved with a lethal, fluid elegance. They didn't just dance, they commanded the space. Every turn was a statement, every look between them a testament to a bond that went deeper than secondary genders or social expectations. You're quite terrifying when you're protective, William whispered as he spun Leo under his arm. I learned from the best, Leo replied, leaning into William's warmth. Besides, I couldn't let him touch your coat. That velvet is imported from the north, it's far too expensive for his lily-scented hands. As the dance ended, the room erupted into applause, some genuine, some terrified, all acknowledging the new power couple of the realm. They retreated to a balcony overlooking the snowy gardens. The air was crisp, and the distant sound of the gala felt like a different world. Are you happy, Leo? William asked, pulling Leo's back against his chest, his chin resting on Leo's shoulder. Leo looked out at the moon, feeling the steady heartbeat of the man who had seen the diamond within the flint. For the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm waiting for the world to end. I feel like I'm just beginning. From the shadows of the balcony door, a familiar voice drifted out. I told you, Toby. The white-haired one is a shark. A beautiful, terrifying shark. Uncle Julian whispered, clinking a glass of champagne against Toby's cider. Best show in the capital. Hand over 5 gold pieces, you bet against him holding the dukes. Interest for the whole waltz. Toby groaned, handing over the coins. I should have known. He's got that look in his eye. I know the tax code, look. It's unbeatable. Leo laughed, leaning his head back against William's shoulder. We really need to stop your uncle from betting on our marriage. Never, William smiled, kissing the crown of Leo's head. He's the only one who saw us coming. And besides, he's winning quite a lot of money. We might need him to bail out your mother when she finally realizes the defect has cut off her credit. Leo closed his eyes, the scent of sandalwood and winter air finally feeling like home. The end.